Pond ice. Derek entered the local rink where he was going to meet up with some friends from school to shoot around for an hour or so. It was summer, and this was something they did a couple times a week to stay in shape for tryouts in the fall. Without the indoor rink for them to practice on, their skills would atrophy during the off-season. At their school, hockey was a religion, and those that played on the official youth hockey team were gods. Girls went to their games, they got recognition around town, and after every game, the whole team got to eat at Peter's Pizzeria for free. This year, Derek was finally old enough to try out for the team, so he had been practicing with as much ice time as he could get. With a $3 an hour entry fee for non-players, he wasn't able to go every day, so he tried to get the most out of the days he could. Over the weekends, he helped his neighbors by pulling weeds and mowing lawns, which earned him a few bucks, which he then turned into time on the ice. Unlike the other kids at school whose parents dropped them off with spending cash, Derek had to find his own money to get on the ice. While the other kids wasted their time and parents' money in the arcade, Derek was skating through cones and taking shots at the net. He knew that because these other kids had as much ice time as they needed, he had to work twice as hard if he was going to seize this opportunity to make the team. "Can I get an hour on the ice?" Derek asked as he put $3 bills on the counter. "Of course you can, Derek," the man running the warming house said. "But just one thing. Do you have any other gear?" "Other gear? All I have is my stick, my skates, and a puck." "Ah," the warming house attendant sighed. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you play without full gear." "Full gear? I thought I didn't get my gear unless I made the team. I come here all the time to play, and you always let me in." "I know, Derek, and I'm sorry, but we had a young man take a slap shot to the face the other day. Exploded his nose. It was a huge ordeal. His parents threatened to sue us for not having the appropriate precautions put in place. Now nobody can skate without full gear." "But if I can't skate, then I won't be able to get good enough to make the team." "I know, little dude, and I'm sorry, but rules are rules." Derek sighed and turned away from the counter, slumping and slowly shuffling his shoes towards the exit. He stopped to peer through the viewing window to see who was out on the ice. There were 3 of his classmates geared up with brand new pads, helmets, and gloves. He guessed by looking at their gear that it was expensive. His stick and skates were both hand-me-downs from his brother, and the thought of new gear seemed exciting. To look as cool as they did on the ice would surely boost his confidence as well as his playing abilities. He may miss a day on the ice, but after explaining the situation to his father, they would take a trip to the sporting goods store and he would be on the ice again tomorrow. "I'm sorry, Derek, but we can't afford to buy you hockey pads," his mother spoke up before his dad could answer. His father hadn't even looked up from the food on his plate when he asked. "But I need them." "The answer is no, Derek," his dad answered, still not looking up from his plate. "You'll borrow the pads from the team just like your brother. Every player gets to borrow pads if they don't have them." "But they changed the rules. I won't be able to make the team if I can't practice through the summer." "You won't make the team because you suck," his brother teased. "Shut up. You suck, Tyler." "Both of you stop," his father said, finally looking up from his plate to make terrifying eye contact with each of his sons. "But it's not fair," Derek protested. "I know it's not fair. I'm sorry, Derek, but I can't afford to buy you hockey pads." "Why?" "Because they're too expensive for us. We have to pay for your tuition at the private school." "Why?" "Because they offer a better education and unlock better opportunities than public school." "Why?" "Because the public school system has been slipping for decades and there is no lobby in Washington trying to better education." "Why?" "Enough!" his father shouted, slamming his hands on the table. "Derek, enough of the questions. I got a public school education, and because of that, I work a labor-intensive job that barely pays enough for us to get by. Whatever extra money we have goes to the tuition for you and your brother so you can get a better education, get a better job, and earn enough to take care of your mother and I." Derek didn't respond and instead looked down at his plate of food. He wasn't upset at his parents, though he was upset at the situation they seemed to put him in. He knew that the parents of the kids at school had better jobs like what his father was describing for him. It seemed unfair that his dad had to work so hard and come home dirty for so little compared to the other parents who came home clean and didn't appear to be working as hard. He didn't understand the educational disparity between the schools and how that affects the individual's future earning potential. All he really understood was that they couldn't afford the gear and therefore he couldn't practice on the ice throughout the summer. This bummed Derek profusely through the long summer days. Instead of practicing his passion on the ice, he spent his days at the park. At the park, he met kids who attended the local public school with whom he made friends with. Unlike his private school friends, these kids felt more like peers. While the private school kids wanted to get food, stay inside, or buy things he couldn't afford, the public school kids couldn't afford to do those things either. So instead, they just played outside in the free sunshine. They played lava tag and black magic on the playground, went fishing and swimming in the river, and spent long afternoons hiking aimlessly through the woods. These kids helped Derek enjoy his summer after he thought it was ruined by the unfair rule posted at the ice rink. In a short time, the dog days of summer passed, and Derek was again separated from these friends and sent to study at the private school. Before any of them had the chance to appreciate the freedom of these youthful summer days, they found themselves again sitting in a beige classroom, staring at the brown leaves out the window, wondering how it all could fly by so fast. They had barely blinked before their days of cloud watching and endless running were replaced with multiplication tables and religious studies. The only positive in Derek's eyes for this natural progress of time was the hockey tryouts he had been waiting so long for. If he made the team, he would get the pads, the pizza, and all the free ice time he could skate. Early on Saturday morning, Derek's mom dropped him off outside the rink as she went to park the car. Derek walked confidently inside and checked himself in on the sign-in sheet before he went and stood with the other kids he recognized from school. All of the kids from his school had their pads and gear kept in huge hockey bags that were slung over their shoulders. "Where's your gear, Derek?" one of them asked with an elitist tone to his voice. "I don't have any. I have to borrow it," he shyly answered. A couple of the kids chuckled before one of them pointed to a different group of kids, saying, "You have to wait over there with those kids. Those are the other kids who have to borrow gear." Looking over, Derek actually recognized a few of the other borrowers as kids from his group of summer friends. They hadn't seen Derek since school started and hadn't yet clocked his presence here today. "Kids that borrow pads never make the team," the rude boy said, loud enough for all the borrowers to hear. The private school kids laughed as they shoved Derek over towards the other line. Derek hung his head with embarrassment as he joined the other group who were waiting to borrow their gear. The kids from his summer group were standing near the front of the line, leaving Derek at the back away from anyone he knew. This whole ordeal made Derek uncomfortable and made him feel like he wanted to disappear. After seeing him targeted by the confident kids with expensive gear, the other kids in line avoided eye contact with Derek to save themselves from targeting as well. Already tryouts were not going well. Then his mom walked in and shouted, "I love you, honey. Good luck." To which all of the children responded with uproarious laughter. After being used as the filter for most of the nervous anxiety in the room, Derek finally got his pads from the equipment coach. When he tried them on, however, they were awkward, uncomfortable, and didn't fit on his body. The pants seemed too tight while the shoulder pads felt too big. His mom helped tighten and loosen them as best she could, but he had to work with what he had. As he stood there letting his mother tug and pull on his pads in front of God and everyone, he couldn't stop repeating what that kid had said. Kids that borrow pads never make the team. And he felt like he knew why. When his gear was on, he tied his skates, put his helmet on, and took his stick to the ice. He felt excited as he ran across the rubber floor and hopped onto the ice. Like silk socks sliding into satin sheets, his skates took to the ice as if they were happily reunited with this frictionless surface. The ice on the indoor rink was perfect, seamless, level, and smooth. The kids were gliding effortlessly across this freshly zambonied surface. The air in the rink was chilled to keep the ice just a few degrees away from melting. While their breath may be visible, the kids felt warm while moving around the refrigerated room. The focus lights on the rink kept visibility clear in this environment where so many kids were skating so close to one another. Derek felt like he was at home on the ice in this rink. Nothing compared to it, though truthfully he had legs like a baby deer. After warming up for a few minutes, the coach spoke through a microphone to address the room. He told the kids to each grab a number and line up in whatever order they chose. Then he told the parents that while they could watch, he would eject anyone who spoke up to cheer on or try to coach the kids during tryouts. With the rules in place, he blew a whistle and they started skating killers. Starting at the baseline, they had to skate and touch each line, returning to the base with each touch. It was here initially where the strong began to separate from the weak. The private school kids skated killers with ease, stopping on a dime and touching the lines without issue, while Derek, along with the other borrowers, struggled to keep pace. As the day progressed, this gap in skill could be seen with every drill they ran. At the end of tryouts, the kids were allowed to roam free while the coaches tallied up their scores and picked the kids for the team. Some of the kids stayed in the rink trying to get as much time on this perfect ice as they could. They knew their chances of making the team were low, and they only only tried out to skate on this professionally iced rink. Other kids got food and were either horse playing or spending money in the arcade. Derek sat with his mom, who had packed him a sandwich with some chips, cookies, and a clementine for lunch. She expressed her pride in seeing him play, and in her eyes, she claimed he was one of the best on the ice. The coaches apparently did not concur with her assessment, however, when they announced the results of this year's tryouts. Derek held his head in shame when his number was not called aloud with the others who had made the team. His buddies from the private school, along with a few public school kids who had their own gear, skated out to stand next to the coaches. The only kid who had borrowed gear and made the team was also the only kid brave enough to play goalie. Aside from that, his private school peer was right. No kid that had borrowed pads made the team. The players who had made the team got to stay for their first team meeting, while Derek, along with the others, had to leave. Tears flowed from his face as he felt the dream-crushing reality he was living in. Derek wanted nothing more than to play on that team, but it wasn't meant to be. His mom felt empathy for her son in the car ride home, as she too knew what it felt like to be excluded from something in this way. He could not explain his frustration at this moment, as he blamed his level of skill on the fact that he wasn't able to practice over the summer. He wanted to be mad at his parents for not being able to afford the gear, but he knew that the real issue was with the rule that the ice rink made, or maybe the slap shot that exploded that guy's nose, or perhaps he just wasn't good enough to begin with. Whatever was to blame, the fact remained that he did not make the team. Derek had a hard time processing how he felt having not made the team. It didn't help that now at school he was one of the only boys in his class who wasn't on the hockey team. His friends who would typically talk to him were now inadvertently isolating him from their conversations. He didn't understand the inside jokes or stories from a team's practices he wasn't a part of. Now that the team was together and the season approaching, hockey seemed to be the only topic of discussion, and Derek couldn't play. At home, it wasn't much different, as his father was constantly talking about the league or watching the Wild game on TV. Being so surrounded by hockey didn't turn him away from it as much as it made him long to play more. Tyler, his brother, recognized this longing in his little brother, as he went through the same pain when he eventually didn't make the hockey team either. He wanted to help boost his little brother out of this funk he was feeling. He knew how it felt to try your hardest and to be told you weren't good enough, to be excluded from playing a sport that you loved, and to have your dreams taken from you before they could begin. Seeing the young guy moping around the house was really bumming everyone out, so Tyler thought he would share something with his little brother that could help pull him up from how low he was feeling. He told Derek to grab his skates and stick and to dress warm. After breakfast on a Saturday in December, the two of them walked out of the house and down to the pond where Derek had fished a few times during the summer. To get to the pond, they had to walk across the field near the public school and go down a small hill. Derek noticed there was already a trail of footsteps from the curb all the way to the pond. It didn't occur to him as they walked through the field, but when they got to the hill, Derek could see the kids skating on the frozen pond below. His brother was showing him that just because he didn't make the team didn't mean that he couldn't play. It was a tradition in town for the kids to shovel the snow off the frozen pond to make themselves a rink. They had been doing so for many years on this pond that now someone had built a small shed with benches to act as a warming house on cold days. Derek recognized almost all of the kids there as kids he met at the park over the summer. There were the other kids from the tryouts who also didn't make the team that were smiling and laughing as they passed the puck between each other. Tyler had fulfilled his duty as an older brother by introducing Derek to this winter hangout location. Though the kids changed through the generational cycles, every winter they returned to this frozen pond to play the same game. Pond hockey is very similar to the regular game of hockey, only played on a smaller rink with smaller goals. Consider it the pickleball of hockey. It isn't full-size hockey, and it isn't tabletop bubble hockey either. It's in the middle. Unlike full-size hockey, pond hockey is played on, well, a pond. Being played on a pond, there are no boards with glass surrounding the ice. Instead of goals, there are two boxes that are 3 feet long, 1 foot deep, and 3 inches high, with 2 holes on either end that are just a bit wider than a hockey puck. The game is simple. Just take the puck and put it in the other team's box. Only, of course, it is never that simple, as the size of the rink, boxes, and lack of boards, as well as the actual terrain of the ice, makes it harder to control in the chaotic in-game environment. Derek learned about the terrain of the ice when he tied his skates and hopped onto the pond for the first time. Unlike the frictionless surface his skates slid across on the indoor ice, the pond was covered in bumps, ridges, and craters. Caused by the wind rippling across the surface of the water just before it fully froze, there was no Zamboni out there to fix the trypophobic surface they skated on. Skating required thigh muscles to push their bodies around as the condition of the ice quickly stopped their momentum. The surface was discolored from the green pond water, and it was far from level. Raised bumps of matte dark ice caused by spilled sodas or bloody noses created ramps on the ice that sent a puck flying with ease. It was a windy day, though the weather didn't stop any of them. Not even the setting sun ruined their fun as they played into the evening by the light of the moon, reflecting on the snow-covered ground. This was an entirely new skating experience for Derek, though he took to it like a Labrador to water. The kids instantly invited him to join their game and threw him on the team with less players. He was initially in a state of shock trying to keep up with the pace of the game. As he played cautiously on the tight-quartered ice, he noticed the other kids ignoring all rules of the game. They were checking and tripping, high-sticking and hooking each other with the attitude that this was normal. Now, while nobody else was calling for penalties or being sent to the box, Derek found himself getting frustrated by this kid who kept putting his stick on top of Derek's so that he couldn't lift up to receive a pass. This continued annoyance turned into a hip check from Derek, which became a shove from the kid. Seeing this aggression, the other kids circled up and started calling for them to fight. While fighting is an official part of the professional hockey game, in youth sports it is highly discouraged. However, for these kids, fighting was one of the best parts of pond hockey. While it wasn't what they came out to do, hockey is a physical game and sometimes tension arises between players, and the easiest way to settle it is with a few punches to the face. Derek was not prepared for this as the kid skated towards him and grabbed his shirt, yanking the collar loose as he pulled it towards him. Derek flung forward into the kid's first punch before he realized this was happening. He tried swinging wildly from the sides, but the kid blocked his shots with his forearms. Then he dropped an elbow on Derek's head and shoved him into the snow pile. From down in the snow pile, Derek felt embarrassed for losing his first hockey fight. He couldn't hear the other kids taunting and laughing from the excitement, and it made him feel worse than the elbow on his head. He felt that being down in the snow pile meant that his time on the pond was up. After losing the fight, he thought they would continue teasing him until he took his skates off and walked home. They would never accept him in their group or ask him to play after that. He was wrong, however, as the kid who beat him up was the one to reach a hand down and help pull Derek back up on his skates. "Nice try, but I'm the best fighter here," the kid said. "I'm Trent. I come here to play almost every day." "Derek," he answered as he shook hands. "Nice to see you out here, Derek. It's always good to get new players." Trent and Derek became fast friends after, bonded by the punches they shared. It was easy for Derek to make friends with all the kids out there skating on the pond ice. They were all bonded by this makeshift rink on the natural ice as it gave them the opportunity to skate, which they did as often as they could. Every day after school, on the weekend mornings, and all day into the night. They would each bring a thermos of hot water and sometimes pack a lunch or run home to eat during a brief lapse in play. But for the most part, they spent their days perfecting their skills for the niche game of pond hockey. The pond ice pulled Derek right out of the funk he was feeling since he hadn't made the team. He no longer felt isolated and inadequate compared to his peers. With this group of friends from the local public school, he saw himself fitting in and making what felt like real connections with other kids. While his private school peers were concerned with possessing the latest and most luxurious material items, the kids from the pond just wanted to find the latest way to make each other laugh. They competed without pressure, playing pond hockey, unlike the organized team whose kids trained like Green Berets. Seeing the strain of a loss put on the kids at his lunch table gave Derek a new perspective into what he had once been upset to have lost. This shift in perspective caused him to smirk sharply one day in front of those kids as they were aggressively discussing the latest defeat. Admittedly, their team was not great, and this discussion, as well as Derek's smirk, was a common occurrence at the lunch table. Typically, emotions among the young players would rise, and Derek would be ignored as a non-player among them. Today was different. After their coach had called each of their faults out individually, that eliminated their ability to place blame on one another. This collective embarrassment ritual created an awkward situation which put Derek in the position to become the target of their aggressive when they saw him smirking at the end of the table. "What are you smiling about, Derek?" the team center asked angrily. "You didn't even make the team." "He didn't make the team because his parents couldn't afford to buy him gear," the left wing said, causing them to all laugh at him. "Whatever. At least I'm not constantly losing and having no fun playing hockey." "Well, at least we get to play hockey. They won't even let you rent time on the ice." "I play hockey every day." Yeah, right. Where do you play hockey? I play on the pond with the other kids there. The pond? The one by the public school? He's lying. I bet that green water doesn't even freeze. It does too. We shovel it off and play pond hockey out there every day. Pond hockey? With the little boxes? That's for babies. You can't even talk to us about hockey if you're playing pond hockey. It's not for babies. It's way harder than hockey with goals. The puck moves faster, it's more crowded, we're aggressive, and it's harder to score. Yeah, Derek, of course you say that. You didn't even make the team. I bet we would whoop you losers in pond hockey. I bet you wouldn't. I bet you won't even show up at the pond to play us. A silence fell over the room as the challenge was made. The center looked at his three teammates and they all nodded in agreement. Fine. We accept your challenge, Derek. We'll show up at the pond after school and play you in the pores from the public school. We'll show you what real hockey players can do. I just hope you don't cry after we embarrass you in front of everyone you know. Derek was a little nervous the rest of the day as he tried convincing himself that challenging them wasn't a terrible idea. He knew the differences in their game were significant, but their organization and chemistry developed in practice was something his friends were unprepared for. The pond players were chaotic and cared more about having fun than scoring or winning the game. Some days they wouldn't even tally a single goal, instead spending the afternoon horseplaying and grabbing ass. They were unfazed by the prospect of facing the private school players. Seeing the confidence of the pond players made Derek hopeful that they wouldn't let him down. When the private school players arrived at the pond, they were beaming with arrogance, convinced that they'd already won the game. They geared themselves up and were surprised to see not even a single pair of hockey gloves among the pond players. The game was 3-on-3 with one man cycling in from the sideline. Apart from the players, the area around the pond was filled with spectators from both schools. Word had quickly spread around among the children of the area, who were all eager to see some aggressive competition. The surrounding crowd created a building pressure in all of the players to perform. The private school players had a shocking start as they tried to adjust to the pond ice terrain. The ice was worse than they expected or could have possibly anticipated. They struggled to skate, stop, or move in any direction, all while trying to keep possession of the puck and avoid collision on the ice. Unlike the official organized sport they were used to playing, these kids were trying to collide with their opponents. They were shoving, hip-checking, and pushing them towards a brawl. With all the commotion from the crowd combined with the difference in game and condition of the ice, the private school players found themselves skating on some thin ice. The position of the puck didn't seem to matter as the public school kids were cross-checking their opponents mid-ice. Before long, Trent had started a fight with one of the wings and was having his fun with it. He grabbed the back of the kid's shirt and pulled it over his head as he started throwing punches at his covered face. Another tried to jump in to save his friend, but he was hooked with a stick and had his skates pulled out from under him. Derek hopped in with the rest of the kids on the ice to break up the fight so they could get back to playing. They pulled Trent away as he shoved the kid ass first into the snow. That kid sat out with a bloody nose and a black eye, and his sub came in to replace him. Despite the fact that the next goal scored would also be the first, they declared that the next scorer wins. Now the private school kids felt they had something to prove against those who they deemed as beneath them. The center started with the puck and tried skating up with it, but was stopped when a jagged chunk of ice sticking up from the surface blocked the movement of his stick. Derek grabbed the puck from him and took a quick shot that hit the middle of the box. The puck was passed among the private school players a few times before it was stolen by one of their opponents. They passed the puck to Derek, who tried to pass it again, though a bump in the ice caused it to hop right in the private school center's glove. He caught the puck and threw it down, but was ambushed by Derek and the others. The dueling blades of the sticks clashed with each other, struggling to get the upper hand. The puck was caught in a limbo between them as they pushed and shoved each other for dominance. Each boy was determined, but with a hip check, Derek was able to slip in front of the center stick and throw the puck backhanded his way on the ice. The puck hovered just above the ice before hitting the toe of a skate and bouncing right into the hole. Goal! The crowd shouted from excitement as the pond hockey kids had just beaten the private school kids. Derek lifted his hands and screamed before his teammates lifted him victoriously on their shoulders. That day, they felt like the hockey champions they'd always wanted to be. The crowd cheered and thanked them for winning what was truly an entertaining game of pond hockey. It proved that expensive gear and organization didn't matter out here on the ice. Anyone could play as long as they had a stick and some skates. From up on those shoulders of giants, Derek watched his private school peers pack up their gear and walk away, defeated from those kids and that rugged pond ice. The end. I love you.